Welcome back to the program. Zev Brenner, we're continuing looking at the final chapter of the Chaim Walder story, and we are going to take your phone calls in just a little bit. But first, I wanted to thank Morty Getz and Eichlers.com for not only sponsoring this broadcast, but they took the lead in banning the books from their store early on, a heroic decision. And they want to make sure that the books that they carry in the store don't have the kind of taint which the Chaim Walder books had. And you can always shop at them. Shop Eichlers.com. Shop Eichlers.com. With us right now is Dr. Trish Attias. She's been working with survivors of incest and sexual abuse for 40 years. Early in her career, she worked in and later established trauma units in psychiatric hospitals. She currently is in private practice and serves as the co-president and clinical consultant of Our Place. Dr. Trish Attias, thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
And we'll be joined we're waiting for Meyer Laban, who's a Hasidic activist. He should be joining us momentarily as well. So, what do you make about this whole Chaim Walder affair? First, let's look at the impact that it has, because I understand in Israel somebody committed suicide after he committed suicide. One of his victims committed suicide.
Well, it's been very distressing, needless to say, for survivors. Um, Not just the issue of what he did, but the outpouring of support for him um, by a lot of people in the Orthodox community has brought up a lot of similar issues that people had when they told their parents, when they told um, employers, when they told people what had happened to them, and they were not believed. So there's a lot of sadness, a lot of pain, reopening of old wounds as they see who is a man who's a potential perpetrator, he wasn't convicted, being lauded by the community.
But was he lauded by the community? Because it seemed in the last 2 or 3 weeks, once the story broke, I have to give credit not only to Haredi media in Israel, but you had publications where he was involved with that stopped selling his books. You have Eichlers in Borough Park that took the first lead in doing so. He lost his job in an Israeli radio station. He was criticized by lots of Haredi media. They was told not to buy the book. So I would say in this particular case, they were quick to react in a positive way.
Yeah, I think it was the funeral that was really hard for my clients, and it's what the young men and women were reporting at our place as well. Just seeing this outpouring of support at the funeral appeared to the clients. I'm just speaking, kind of giving them a voice for the survivors. It appeared to them that he was given a lot of support.
We're joined by Meyer Laban, who's a Hasidic activist, and we had him on before with this particular story. Were you surprised at what the funeral in Israel, how many people showed up, and some of the reaction where people are saying, at least some are saying that, hey, maybe we were too hasty in condemning Chaim Walder? I'd like to get your reaction. Welcome.
Good Tavach, and thanks for having me. Um, I don't. It's hard to say surprised when everything in this whole story was very developed very quickly, and things were very tragic and awful. So I think that if we're gonna make that calculation about what went down, I mean, we would rather want to see the leadership maybe has failed to have a strong voice. So it's natural that people, I believe that some people went to the funeral out of because everything was still so confusing. So a lot of people, I believe, didn't at the moment, because of the way things are dealt with. We talk very little about those things, that people naturally wanted to not believe it. People had a tendency not to believe it. So again, but yes, of course, that for people who went through stuff like that, and even other people, it was hard to stomach to see, hundreds of people. But after all, he was famous, and a lot of those people probably just didn't believe it, unfortunately, because we still have a way to go in how we talk about those things.
Now, Dr. Trish, Meyer said something very interesting that we don't always believe the victims. I think, are we getting better? You've been doing this for 40 years. And this is true of general society 40 years ago to talk about. I remember when I first did Sovry, we're on the air for 40 years. So it was about 38, 39 years ago. I did a show about support of Orthodox victims of rape and incest. And I was criticized. And I said, how can you talk about this? And I said that after our broadcast, 35 women called the shelter for help. I said, if I help one person, I did my job. So I think a lot has changed in 40 years. And I think the fact that we can do such a program such as this is a testament to that. So I think things have changed. Yes, can we do better? But I think in a way, it's good that we're having this conversation and people are talking about it.
Yes, I'm working with this community about 20 years, and I see a huge change. I see a change in schools. I see a change in rabbinical response, and certainly the therapeutic community. There's a lot more support. There are more organizations to support survivors. So, yeah, I think it's been a huge change.
And Mayor, you've probably seen that too, right?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I'm not at the forefront like Dr. Trisha, but I mean, there's definitely more receptiveness today to talk about mental health. Subsequently, like abuse too, but it's still a topic that is really, really hard to like confront at first. To leave because many reasons. First of all, as Haredim, we don't have a lot of public conversations about topics like that. It's not just abuse; it's just general refrain from topics. But it ends up the fact that those topics are not discussed ends up being used by people with very dark intentions. And I think that the Walder story opened the eyes for many, many people that Tznius is not talking about issues like that. That's not what we mean when we say that like we keep our community pure is not by shoving, uncomfortable conversations under the rug, but rather to like show zero tolerance for predators. And I mean, it's like sometimes painful things have to happen to impact change. So I feel like maybe, hopefully, it may be that this Walder story is a little bit of a watershed moment that teaches us that having uncomfortable conversations is actually a good thing, and talking more to our kids about abuse and safety instead of less. And it's not the talking that's the problem. It's like when people don't understand autonomy over their own body, and kids don't get the concept of safety and how to like really like be aware and how to keep our community safe, and like to talk about those things rather than just like follow an instinct to like an intuition to like stay away from such topics. And that is hopefully like what a lot of people are trying to do now, to bring change in that area of like bringing a language that we can talk about sexual safety. And that's like why it's we really need people like Dr. Trisha now to show us the way to like parents. A lot of parents are really receptive now to like do something, but the next frontier really is a lot of education, probably from within community, from like informed by people who know our community, to like really for parents what steps they can take. And that conversation really is what's going on now in lots and lots of families and households, like between parents on a different level of the political or like the public, the news aspect, the gossip aspect. There's a real like need and lack for like good language and good education, and really like clear cut advice for parents, so like how to have these conversations amongst adults, but also between parents and children.
Mayor, thank you. We have a lot of people waiting to speak to you. So let's go to Steve in Brooklyn. Steve in Brooklyn, are you there?
Yes, hello? You hear me?
Yes, go ahead. Your question for our
Yes.
guest.
I'd like to know if you could comment about the letter that was left over, and also about the one in the Rabbanim said the Shvichas Damim involved with this.
what he's saying is that there's blood on the people's hands, I guess, who
That's to report the story, right?
they did the story. Anybody want to comment? Either Meyer or you, Dr. Trish?
I don't know about the letter. What letter is he referencing?
The suicide letter that was left over.
Ah, the suicide letter.
So, I'll maybe fill in Dr. Trish. So maybe you can give us a little bit more perspective from your angle. So, the letter that was left by the author who killed himself was very harsh, very graphic, saying that he's going to go to Bezdin to call those people who accused him. And he said something about that he cannot prove his innocence in this world. And, seeing handwriting from someone and giving that he committed suicide in such a gruesome and graphic way, that together created an effect that it's almost impossible not to have empathy, unfortunately. He created that story because he's such a good storyteller. He created that amazing suicide story. Unfortunately, it's harsh to say it that way. And I'm not in a position of judging a person who, as much as he was despicable, he did an act of insanity which created more harm. And now we'll have to deal also with that trigger. And as we know that one of his victims subsequently also committed suicide. And I think Steve was also referencing a letter by Rav Edelstein, who was talking about the aspect of that the people, or maybe the newspapers who publish stuff like that, kind of that they're responsible. That is a different conversation to be had. How do we with all due respect, and we really believe that people that have Rabbi Edelstein, I cannot even understand the depth of his thinking, but there's also something to be said about, first of all, are those messages that we get from the leaders, from the Gedolim, is this informed by do we know that they're getting all the information before stuff like that is coming out? And also, when it comes to stuff to safety and mental and sexual health, there's a lot that we need to hear from professionals, to really know, because it's a safety and a health issue. And I don't know, as a parent, how to approach this is as much important to listen to people with mental health backgrounds and stuff. And then of course, as Orthodox Jews, we have to make it work with As Torah and with halacha. But
Mayor,
it's hard.
in the interest of time, I'm going to let Dr. Trish respond. We have other callers, so you gave a very interesting and good response. I'll let Dr.
Thank you,
Trish
Zeph.
weigh in.
Thank you, Zeph.
I think the scary thing is to decrease reporting, right? If people are going to be feeling guilty, feeling like they're concerned about reporting because now somebody could kill themselves, that would be one of my concerns, that it would decrease people reporting, when our hope is that one of the positive things that can come out of something like this would be more reporting and people feeling more comfortable.
And do you find that people are more comfortable to come forth and say, hey, I've been abused? Because unfortunately, and I said this earlier tonight, is that somebody who's abused, it has ramifications, because you probably know a certain percentage of them become abusers themselves. Some of them may commit suicide. Their lives are ruined. They leave religion. I mean, I spoke to a lot of people who said they were religious, they were pretty observant, they were abused, and now they're not. So it has a lot of ramifications which we may not realize. Dr. Trish.
Yes, I think most of the people, a lot of the people who are abused are victims and then become survivors. The people who abused them were people who were religious and in power positions. So I think they make a connection that the Haredi world, or the religious world, is filled with perpetrators. They see everybody that way. And one of the important pieces for therapy and therapists is to help people target the people who really hurt them and not generalize that to all of Orthodoxy.
Very interesting point. Our guests are Dr. Trish Attias, been working with survivors of incest and sexual abuse for 40 years. She's currently in private practice and serves as the co-president and clinical consultant of Our Place in Brooklyn. Meyer Laban joining us, has been with us from time to time. He's a Hasidic activist, very knowledgeable about the Chaim Walder case. We're going to take a short commercial break. When we come back, we take some of your phone calls. If you're on the line, we're going to get to you. 212-769-1925. That's 212-769-1925. You want to email us, zevbrenner@gmail.com. zevbrenner@gmail.com. We're happy to entertain your questions, your thoughts, and we'd like to hear what you have to say. This story has generated there's a lot of interest in this story, both here and in Israel. Okay, we're getting to some of your phone calls and some of your emails. Let's go to Adelia in Kew Garden Hills. Go ahead, Adelia. Your question for our guests.
Hi, Shavua Tov. Now, I really want to just emphasize the importance of creating a very large community awareness all around on all the sects, whether more to the right, less to the right, whatever it is, but all the communities. I think a lot of the parents are clueless that we have to really educate. I think with team efforts, where it's the shuls, the yeshivas, everywhere, we have to have certain programs about unwanted touch, and the parents have to be really educated about what is happening and to take measures and steps such as not, such as talking, first of all, to kids as young as 4 and 5, according to their age level, but also understanding that we have tremendous mental health professionals, which I have a lot of respect for, like Trish Attias and all the others, that we have to utilize their guidance and create programs and make sure they're implemented so that everyone will know.
Good suggestions. I'm going to let Dr. Trish Attias respond to you. Go ahead, Dr. Attias.
Well, I don't know all the programs that are out there, but I know that there's a organization called Magenu. It's affiliated with Our Place, and they have developed kind of in a box a whole program that schools can implement on their own. So what I think is unique about this is it's not having outsiders come into these yeshivas. It's the ability to train teachers, social workers, and other school officials so that they can roll that out to their parents and to the school itself. I'm sure there are other programs out there also, but I definitely think there are programs there. Sometimes when something like this happens, people run around, let's create something new. And this is one program. So people could contact Shani at Magenu, and she'd be happy to share this program. I don't know, you may know other programs that are out there. It's critically important. This one hits children and parents and is developed, specifically for our community and age appropriate.
Let me read an email question before we get to our next phone calls. Rachel writes, how are you supposed to react when your children's school is trying to silence children? Attached to this email is a letter from the Bet Jacob of Borough Park. I read it a couple hours ago on the air. But basically, it looks like the principal states that, you shouldn't talk about this Chaim Walder affair, and we have to keep our children's neshamas pure. And it's my tefillah, he writes, that the minds and hearts of our dear children remain pure and wholesome as we navigate this challenge with sensitivity and siyata d'shmaya. I want to get your reaction.
Mine?
Either yours, and then I want to get Meyer's as well.
Unfortunately, we don't live in a pure world. And by not educating kids, we are putting them in danger. So I don't really understand how we can pretend that the world isn't the way that it is. And we have to educate. I'm not sure what the letter was trying to accomplish.
But the letter was trying to accomplish is that the parents should not talk about the Chaim Walder affair. And really, the lesson that we need to take from this affair is that unwanted touching has to be reported to parents. A lot of times they're ashamed. The kids think that they're the only victim. They don't realize that there are others involved. And the fact that it has to be communication when unwanted touching should be verboten. It should not be permitted. And there should be rules in education, but some schools don't want to tackle that. That's where I think the issue is. That's what our listener is writing.
Well, you can use this as an opportunity to educate. We don't have to continue the conversation about Chaim Walder.
Mayor, any thoughts before we take our next phone call?
Yeah, I mean, as Dr. Trish said, definitely it's an uncomfortable conversation, and unfortunately that some people would rather not have the conversation instead of like utilizing that moment to have the conversation. So that letter was a response to actually a conversation that was already happening. And it's very unfortunate that some just try to shut it down because they don't know how to have it. Instead of asking for help, they just rather shut it down.
Okay, let's go to Shlomo on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. Shlomo, your questions or comments for our guests. Go ahead, Shlomo.
Well, Sadia Gaon says one of the 5 things that turns a person off from their connection to Torah is the way a religious person acts, and that has to be told to someone who's been affected by someone who acted in a devious way, that they do not represent Torah. They're very far from it. Someone who has hurt someone, whether sexually or in other ways, that they, in other words, not to be turned off because they represent Torah and they're the antithesis to Torah. That's point number 1. I just want to mention something with Chaim Wald because I know someone who knew him from 50 years ago. He grew up in Haifa, and he was just bright in many ways, very creative, a nice writer, top-notch writer. But the rabbis in Bnei Brak gave him the title rabbi, and they built him up as a top-notch counselor without anything. And I think tests should be given to people. There's even something from Prague, 1968, the sexual preference test.
Okay, in the interest of time, I'm going to let our guests. Anybody want to tackle that?
Evaluation of teachers is what I'm saying.
Okay, that's important. I think Mayor's responding to you.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, definitely. I think that what I take out from what you're just saying is that we need to realize that we need to rely on licensed and professionals who have like credentials, not just people who are like a little macher in the community. They get close to some people and they get like just self-proclaimed therapists. This is a big problem. I don't think it's only in our community, but from my experience, it exists in our communities too. Unfortunately, so the first thing that we need to know, it's an important point, is to go to a licensed therapist if you have to deal with stuff like that, right? I think the doctor can add to that.
Yeah, I was a little concerned because, and maybe you both have the answer to this. I was concerned that he was referred to in many of the articles that I saw as a therapist. And did he have any training?
He was not a licensed therapist.
Okay.
He was not.
So parents have an obligation to check out the therapy. I even saw, I didn't get to speak to Rabbi Ron Eisman about it earlier, but he recommends that the door should be open, or parents should be on the outside when a therapy session is taking place to try to avoid these kinds of situations.
Right. Many of the male therapists that I know will not see women. And I also wanted to say that we've got some great resources in our community with both Relief and Amudim, who vet the therapists, who really know who is licensed and capable. So these are great resources for parents or anyone who wants to reach out for help.
Selma, thank you for a good question. Thank you. Let's go to Rifki in Borough Park. Thank you for waiting. Okay, Rifki in Borough Park, are you there? Go ahead, Rifki. Rifki, are you there? Okay, we'll get Rifki back on the air. Okay, this is such an interesting and important topic. So what I'd like to know, both of you can maybe address this particular issue, is will this be a wake-up call that we're going to see more involvement, more teaching of unwanted touch, or we're going to see that life is going to go back on the way normal? Dr. Trish, is this a wake-up call?
Yeah, I think it's a wake-up call. I think it's not the first wake-up call. We've had other wake-up calls, and I think each one has been responded to. by the community. It's disheartening to hear that there are schools that will try to shut down conversation. But again, I would emphasize that there is a way of addressing the issue and not continuing a conversation about Chaim Walder. I somehow feel that, continuing discussion of this man is not where we need to be. Where we need to be is, how do we educate? Like one of your, callers said, how do we educate? How do we get to the schools? How do we get to the parents? I think the conversation should really shift away from this particular person and move towards helping people report and helping people find treatment.
Let's go to Rifki in Borough Park. Go ahead, Rifki in Borough Park. Your question or comment. Go ahead, Rifki.
Yes. It's a little hard here in America to figure out exactly what happened, but I can kind of guess what was going on. But here's the point that I would like to bring up. You already brought it up, Zeb Brenner, about children being alone. For anything to have happened, they had to have been alone with this gentleman. Whether it's children or a lady, they were alone with him. Otherwise, nothing would have happened. Now, my question is, what kind of parents are these that they leave the kids alone? And now, I will tell you that I reminded myself tonight that when my children were little, and I went to the dentist with them, the dentist said to me, I'm kind of amazed by you. I really, I wish more parents were like this. You always come with your child. And I want you to know that dentist office had about 5 ladies there that were, helping him, nurses, at least 5 nurses in different rooms. Nobody was alone with the dentist. He wasn't saying it for that reason, but he was saying that as a parent, you belong with your child. When your child goes to a doctor or a dentist, you belong there.
I think we agree. I'm a little hesitant to turn this into a parent blaming kind of thing. I think that when, parents are told that this is a trustworthy person, and parents who may be overwhelmed by a lot of other things going on in their life.
Oh, sorry, no, it doesn't work that way. And I heard the other gentleman say you should only go to a licensed person. You think it can't happen with even a doctor, a licensed doctor? It could happen with anybody. You don't know. It's human nature. People have different human nature. People, you don't know what people are mentally at, what level they're at. You don't know what they could do. It could literally happen with a big top doc, and it has. I got news for you. I just heard on the radio. Whoever used this and this doctor years ago, please come forth. We found that he abused people. It has nothing to do with the fact if somebody's licensed or unlicensed. A parent belongs with the child.
Yeah, thank you. But I think that the point the doctor was making, of course, that's true. But even if in some case parents are too overwhelmed or they can't, or there's a reason maybe that clinically the therapist professional opinion is that the kid needs to be alone or something like that. I mean, every case is different. But the general point that you're making is, of course, true. That, like it's a lesson that parents need to be on top of the whereabouts of their kids. I think we can all agree on that.
I don't know. No doctor or anything could say. Well, I can't understand where you're coming from with this. Any procedure that you go, if you go to a legitimate hospital even, when you're going with a child, they let you come along. I go to the emergency room. They were so worried about COVID. I went about a year ago with my grandchild, and they said, of course, one adult can come along with the child.
It's important. Rifki made an excellent point. We appreciate your contribution to the show tonight. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Our final stretch, we're looking at the final chapter of the Chaim Walder story. Dr. Trish Attias joined us. She's been working with survivors of sexual abuse for 40 years. She's with our place. Meyer Laban is a Hasidic activist. Mayor, I addressed this earlier in the evening in a different segment. In your opinion, because Chaim Walder committed suicide, is there a backtracking in some circles where they're willing to cut some slack to Chaim Walder, not take some of the allegations against him so seriously?
So I think that in most of the cases, his suicide confirmed the allegations. The fact that he chose to like end his life in when the evidence was coming out stronger is just like confirming. And I what I do see is there's a lot of people who have misplaced empathy, and they're like, they feel bad for Chaim Walder and his family, and I mean I feel bad too. Of course, it's normal to feel bad for the family, but because the victims don't have names and faces, people forget that those are as real as Chaim Walder and his family. That the people that he abused, although we don't know who they are, they're also in agony now. So by elevating Chaim Walder, we're not comforting his family, we're actively hurting people that have been hurt by him. And that is kind of like the takeaway. That's the point that a lot have been trying to get across to people, that this is not so much about Chaim Walder anymore. It's more like, as a community, how do we make it a place that where victims feel comfortable coming forward with their story, where they feel believed and supported, even if they're going to come out against people who are very powerful in the community, who it might make us look bad, but we still put the safety of individuals first. And I think that throughout the show we've spoken a little bit about preventative measures and like how to pick a therapist and if parents should go along. But really a strong point to like get across would be that really what we need to do is also like to make sure as a community that we are the kind of place where like, or also as parents, that when we hear such stories and when victims come to us, first of all they feel comfortable coming forward, and second that they're believed, and that we like really like we see them in our society, that we see them f- that they exist, and that invalidate what they went through.
Excellent points that you're making. We have about 2 moments left. Let me turn to Dr. Trish Attia. Rabbi Eisen, before we mentioned the fact that if he supports the banning of Chaim Walder's books, for example, if a victim walks into a home and sees a book by Chaim Walder, can trigger a reaction. I'm curious to get your professional opinion. If somebody walks into a house that's a victim of sexual abuse, whether Chaim Walder or somebody else, can seeing a book or something else be a trigger?
I guess it could be. I think it can feel like supporting somebody that has been accused of being a perpetrator. So I think that could be a trigger for people. I think I've never seen his books, but I think there are probably a lot of other children's books, and so I don't know why you'd even risk keeping that around. Why would you risk even your children asking you, "Hey, I heard about this guy. Why do we have his books?"
So the question I have for you is going beyond Chaim Walder. Take Bill Cosby, for example. They banned his TV show after he was convicted. But theoretically speaking, if somebody was a victim of Bill Cosby, if they happen to tune into the TV show, it could have that same kind of effect.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And remember, one of the things that, it seems to be particularly distressing for survivors is that often the abuser is someone held up in high esteem, whether it's somebody that teaches, whether it's somebody that is lauded in a positive way. One of the most painful things for survivors is that contrast between, oh, your father, uncle, rabbi teaches such a great guy, does so many wonderful things, and this person knows what they have suffered at these same hands. And that disparity has been and continues to be extremely painful for survivors.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. I want to thank both of you, really, I think, giving us some tremendous insight and important insight. Dr. Trish Attia, who's a co-president clinical consultant of Our Place, Meyer Laban, thank you for joining us on our special broadcast.
Thank you, Zev.
Thank
But-
you. Thank you so much. Important topic.
Yes, thank you so much. Okay, believe it or not, we are out of time. Can't believe how fast the time has flown. So